The sound of the gavel cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot. Conversations died mid-sentence and every head turned toward the bench. Judge Beryl Howell leaned forward, her eyes sharp as blades, her voice slicing through the tense air. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said slowly, savoring every syllable like a warning. "You are treading dangerously close to contempt." The words hung heavy, weighted with authority. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts, reporters straining for a better angle. A few feet away, Jasmine Crockett stood perfectly still, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. But the room wasn't calm. It was a storm of whispers and quick, nervous glances. Everyone knew what contempt meant. Jail time. A headline that could bury a career. The kind of stain that never washes off. Howell's lips curled into the faintest smirk, a signal that she thought the game was over before it began. She tapped the gavel again, slower this time, as if to punctuate her dominance. "Do you understand what that means, Congresswoman?" she pressed, voice dripping with the kind of confidence that comes from years of unchecked power. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her chin lifted just slightly, a gesture so subtle it felt like defiance dressed in elegance. A single breath, steady as steel. In the back of the room, a reporter mouthed something to her colleague. "She's finished." Another journalist scribbled the headline forming in his head, "Judge Howell lowers the hammer on rising star." The judge leaned even closer now, eyes narrowing. "You will answer this court respectfully," she warned, each word sharp enough to cut. "Or I will hold you in contempt immediately. Is that clear?" The murmurs rose again, louder this time, like the growl of an audience sensing blood. The cameras didn't just flash, they exploded in staccato bursts, desperate to capture the moment a congresswoman buckled under pressure. But Jasmine didn't buckle. Instead, she smiled. Not wide. Not loud. Just a slow, deliberate curve of the lips, as if Howell had just told a joke that only Jasmine understood. For a fraction of a second, confusion flickered across the judge's face, barely visible but impossible to hide from those watching closely. And that's when the room truly fell silent. Because what Howell didn't know was that the woman standing before her wasn't just another politician playing defense. She was a legal architect of brilliance, and the game had only just begun. By the time the gavel struck, America was already watching. Headlines screamed across every screen, "Congresswoman faces contempt threat," a phrase designed to ignite outrage and fear. Cable news panels broke into emergency coverage. Commentators speculated in hushed, urgent tones about whether Jasmine Crockett had overplayed her hand, or if this was something bigger. It wasn't just another courtroom drama. This was a collision of power and principle. On one side, Judge Beryl Howell, a towering figure of the establishment, known for ruling with an iron grip. To many, she was the embodiment of a system that bends for no one, not even the elected. To others, she was proof that unchecked authority still thrives behind polished wood and marble walls. On the other side stood Jasmine Crockett, a freshman lawmaker to some, but to those who knew her story, a relentless defender of truth and fairness. She wasn't here for spectacle. She was here for the very soul of what justice means. And she wasn't about to bow, even when the gavel threatened to crush her. Outside, the reaction burned through social media like wildfire. Contemptgate trended within minutes. Tweets flooded timelines, "If they can do this to her, they can do it to anyone." Instagram reels dissected the glare Howell threw across the bench. TikTok edits of Jasmine's calm expression racked up millions of views in hours. Everyone felt the weight of this moment because it wasn't just about Jasmine, it was about every voice that's been told to stay quiet. The country braced itself for a verdict that could echo far beyond these walls. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the explosion about to happen inside the courtroom. For more than 2 decades, Judge Beryl Howell had worn her authority like armor. In Washington's legal circles, her name carried a weight that silenced conversations and stiffened spines. She was the judge who never blinked, never bent, and never backed down, not for presidents, not for billionaires, not for anyone. Her rulings had made headlines long before this day. She had dressed down high-profile attorneys on live television, leaving their reputations in tatters. She had crushed the most elaborate defense strategies with nothing but her gavel and her glare. Some whispered that Howell didn't just enforce the law, she was the law, a force of nature in black robes. Critics accused her of arrogance, of wielding her bench like a throne. They pointed to the cases where she seemed to savor humiliation, those razor-sharp rebukes that cut deeper than any sanction. But supporters, they loved her for it. They called her fearless, a judge who would stare down power and make it tremble. And maybe they were right, because no one had ever bested her. Not the white-collar kingpins, not the political heavyweights, not the attorneys who thought their pedigree would protect them. Howell's courtroom was her empire, and in that empire, the gavel was absolute. That's why today felt inevitable. When Howell fixed her eyes on Jasmine Crockett and uttered that cold warning about contempt, the room believed the ending was already written. They'd seen this story before. The young challenger steps up, speaks too boldly, and pays the price for daring to defy the queen of her court. Reporters leaned forward, waiting for the moment when Jasmine would falter, when Howell would deliver that famous withering lecture, that final slam of judgment, because if history had taught them anything, it was this: Beryl Howell always had the last word. Or so they thought. She believed her gavel was the sound of inevitability, the punctuation that ended every argument. But this time, the story wasn't going to follow her script. She thought her gavel was the final word until Jasmine opened her mouth. Before the cameras and the bright lights, before the headlines and the hashtags, Jasmine Crockett was a girl growing up in a world that didn't expect much from her. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood in Texas, she knew the weight of struggle early on. Her parents worked long hours, her mother juggling 2 jobs, her father repairing cars in the sweltering heat just to keep food on the table. College wasn't a given. Success wasn't guaranteed. But Jasmine, she refused to be boxed in by anyone's low expectations. She was the kind of student teachers remembered not for being loud, but for the sharp way her mind worked. When other kids were memorizing answers, Jasmine was questioning why the system was the way it was. That curiosity burned hotter when she saw how the law treated her community: neighbors losing homes, friends getting records for minor mistakes, families torn apart. She didn't just want answers, she wanted change. Law school wasn't easy. She didn't have the legacy connections, the family name, or the cushion of wealth. She had grit, determination, and nights fueled by cheap coffee and sheer willpower. She graduated near the top of her class, not because anyone opened doors for her, but because she learned how to break through them herself. And when she stepped into the courtroom for the first time as an attorney, she wasn't there for prestige. She was there for people no one else would fight for: the single mother wrongfully evicted, the young man facing years behind bars for a charge that didn't fit the facts. Jasmine didn't just argue cases, she dismantled injustices piece by piece. Her approach was quiet, surgical. No theatrics, no bluster, just pure strategy. And it worked. One by one, the wins piled up. Landmark cases that restored voting rights. Lawsuits that exposed discrimination others were too afraid to challenge. She became a name whispered among those who believed in real justice, a defender of the voiceless, a storm in a tailored suit. But Jasmine didn't stop at the courtroom. She saw a bigger fight, the fight for systemic change. That's what pulled her into politics. Not ambition, not vanity mission. She carried the same fire into Congress that once drove her through those sleepless nights in law school, the belief that truth, when armed with courage, could topple any giant. What no one expected, not the pundits, not the power players, not even the judge now glaring down from the bench, was that the sharpest weapon Jasmine carried wasn't her title. It was the same tool that had carried her through every uphill battle, her mind. Her training. Her mastery of the law itself. And now, all of that brilliance was about to surface in the most unexpected way. The gavel cracked again, louder this time, like a warning shot meant to rattle bones. Judge Howell's voice boomed across the courtroom, sharp and unyielding. "Congresswoman Crockett," she snapped, "this is not a campaign rally. You will answer the question directly, without speeches, or I will hold you in contempt right here, right now." The murmurs rose immediately. Reporters exchanged looks. There it is, the moment they'd been waiting for. Cameras zoomed in, hungry for the image of Jasmine shrinking under the weight of authority. But Jasmine didn't shrink. She didn't even blink. "Your Honor," Jasmine began, her tone smooth as glass, "with respect, I'm answering the question within the—" "No," Howell cut her off, slamming the gavel again. Bang. "You're grandstanding. This court will not tolerate political theater." A sharp inhale rippled through the audience. Someone in the back muttered, "Wow." A journalist scribbled "political theater" in bold letters on his notepad. Jasmine tilted her head slightly, the faintest sign of surprise, though not at Howell's words, but at how predictable they were. "Your Honor," she tried again, calm, almost melodic, "my answer goes to the heart of—" "Don't lecture me on what this court requires," Howell barked, her voice a whip crack. "You are here to comply, not to posture. Do you understand?" The tension was thick now, pressing on every chest in the room. A low hum of whispers swirled like wind before a storm. A few jurors exchanged uneasy glances. The court reporter's fingers hovered nervously over the keys, sensing something seismic about to break. Jasmine's eyes didn't leave the bench. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. Instead, she stood in perfect stillness, letting the silence stretch until even the cameras seemed to lean forward. And then, softly, she spoke. "With respect, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady as steel, "I know exactly what this court requires. And I intend to follow the law." The words weren't loud, but they carried something in the tone, a quiet authority Howell hadn't anticipated, settled over the room like a shadow. For the first time, the judge hesitated. Just a flicker, a heartbeat, but enough for every reporter to notice. Pens froze mid-sentence. Someone whispered, "Did you see that?" Jasmine inhaled slowly, a breath so calm it felt like a prelude. Then, with one calm breath, Jasmine changed the entire game. The room was silent but alive, like the air just before lightning splits the sky. Every eye locked on Jasmine as she took that deliberate step forward. Not defiant. Not timid. Controlled. Calculated. Judge Howell adjusted her glasses, trying to reassert dominance with a glare that had crushed seasoned attorneys before breakfast. "Congresswoman," she said, the edge of her voice fraying, "you are skating very close to contempt." Jasmine's reply was soft but sharp enough to draw blood. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she began, "the statute governing contempt, Title 18, Section 401, limits the court's power to instances where there is actual obstruction of the administration of justice." Expressing a legal opinion, even passionately, does not qualify. Gasps. Audible. Someone in the gallery whispered, she quoted the statute. Another murmured, on the spot reporters scribbled like their pens were on fire. Howell's jaw tensed. You are testing my patience, Congresswoman. Patience is not the same as authority, Jasmine said, her voice like silk over steel. And this court's authority is derived from the Constitution, specifically Article 3, and that authority has limits. Boom. That wasn't just an answer. That was a scalpel slicing through arrogance. The judge tried to pivot. I am well aware of the court's authority. Jasmine nodded lightly. Of course. Which is why I'm certain you're familiar with Bloom v. Illinois, 391 U.S. 194 1968. At that name, the room stilled. Howell blinked. The case was a cornerstone on contempt limitations. A precedent Howell herself had cited on record during a high-profile corruption trial 5 years ago. You quoted it, Your Honor, Jasmine continued, her voice unwavering, when you said, and I'm paraphrasing, contempt powers are not instruments of judicial ego, they are safeguards for the judicial process. A single beat of silence stretched like an eternity. Reporters froze, pens mid-air. The hum of cameras became the loudest sound in the room. Howell's face reddened slow at first, then blooming like a warning flare. This is highly irregular, she stammered, reaching for her gavel as if it were a weapon. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked in, steady, almost serene. Irregular, she said softly, is using contempt to silence constitutional arguments. That is not law, Your Honor. That is power unchecked. Whispers. Gasps. Someone mouthed, did she just say that? The judge's gavel slammed. Bang. Order. She roared, but her voice cracked. For the first time, Beryl Howell the untouchable sounded rattled. And then came the masterstroke. Your Honor, Jasmine said, her tone calm enough to slice through the chaos, if the court truly believes I am in contempt for defending constitutional principles, then I am ready to appeal immediately to the D.C. Circuit. And given your own prior rulings on this exact issue. She let the pause linger, lethal. That would make quite the headline, wouldn't it? The room detonated in whispers. Reporters' thumbs flew across screens like machine guns. Twitter explodes, legal genius trends. Howell's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. Her hand trembled over the gavel. She had ruled over senators, CEOs, even intelligence officers without breaking a sweat. But right now she was bleeding credibility in real time. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply stood there, a silhouette of calm in a storm of chaos, letting the weight of her words hang like the sword of Damocles. Then she dropped the final line, the one that would echo through legal circles, newsrooms, and late-night comedy monologues for weeks. The law doesn't bend for power, Your Honor. Power bends for the law. For a heartbeat, the courtroom seemed to forget to breathe. And then, slowly, the whispers surged like a tidal wave. Reporters were already typing headlines, Crockett School's federal judge in stunning showdown. And if that wasn't enough, what happened next sent shockwaves through Washington. When the internet erupted. By the time Jasmine left the courthouse, the world had already crowned her the victor. It started with a single tweet: Congresswoman Crockett just schooled a federal judge on her own bench. Historic. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Hashtags erupted like wildfire: legal genius, Jasmine Ewens, gavel vs fire. Clips of her calm takedown looped endlessly on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. One video, slowed down for maximum drama, showed Jasmine's final line, with captions flashing in bold, "Respect the law, or be remembered for breaking it." Memes followed seconds later. One had Howell's gavel photoshopped into a tiny rubber mallet with the caption, "When you bring a toy to a gunfight." Another showed Jasmine wearing virtual armor, sword raised high, under the headline, "Defender of Democracy." TikTok edits remixed her courtroom moment with cinematic music, Hans Zimmer 1 minute, Beyoncé the next. But it wasn't just fans fueling the fire. Major journalists were tweeting live reactions. "The courtroom just witnessed a constitutional masterclass," wrote a senior editor from The Atlantic. Celebrities chimed in too. An actor famous for playing lawyers on TV tweeted, "I thought I knew how courtroom drama worked." Then Jasmine Crockett walked in. Even political rivals couldn't resist acknowledging it. A conservative commentator, visibly shaken in a viral clip, admitted, "That was something else." Cable news picked it up by the hour. Lower thirds screamed, "Jasmine Crockett turns the tables, and when Congress takes the bench to school." Every network played the footage on repeat, dissecting every eyebrow raise, every word, every breath. But it wasn't just entertainment. For millions, it was validation. Immigrant families watching from living rooms whispered with pride. Young law students replayed her argument like an anthem. Comment sections overflowed with messages like, "She didn't just win for herself, she won for all of us." By nightfall, the numbers told the story: 2.4 million tweets, 500,000 TikTok edits, and Jasmine Crockett trending above every global headline. She wasn't just a congresswoman anymore. She was a movement. And yet, inside the viral frenzy, one truth remained: Jasmine hadn't played her final card. The courthouse showdown was over, but her words, the ones she would choose next, would echo louder than any gavel ever could. But Jasmine wasn't done yet. Her closing words would define the day. The courthouse steps had never seen this much electricity. Reporters pressed forward, microphones bristling like spears, camera flashes exploding in the humid Washington air. Beyond the barricades, a crowd roared, not in anger, but in triumph. They chanted her name in unison, "Jas mine. Jas mine." Then the heavy oak doors creaked open. Jasmine Crockett emerged, flanked by two aides who looked more like bodyguards than congressional staffers. But Jasmine didn't need protection. She carried herself with the same serene authority that had dismantled a federal judge hours earlier. Her face was calm, not smug, not gloating, just resolute. If the courtroom had been a battlefield, this was her victory march. The noise hit her like a wave, but she raised one hand, and the chaos melted into a hush. Her voice didn't need amplification, it carried on its own, rich and steady. Today was never about me versus Judge Howell. It was about something bigger. Something that belongs to every American. The press leaned forward, pens flying, cameras rolling. Our laws, the Constitution, aren't weapons for the powerful. They're shields for the people. And when anyone, no matter how high their position, forgets that, it's our duty to remind them. Gasps rippled through the crowd, not because the words were fiery, but because they burned with clarity. This wasn't rhetoric, it was truth forged into language. Jasmine paused, scanning the sea of faces, journalists with furrowed brows, students gripping homemade signs, parents hoisting kids onto shoulders so they could see history being made. Some will call what happened today a scandal. Some will call it a spectacle. But I call it what it is: accountability. Because in America, Justice does not wear a crown, and no one she let the word hang in the air, sharp as steel. No one stands above the law. The crowd erupted, cheers rolling like thunder down Constitution Avenue. Reporters scrambled to beam the soundbite across every network. Hashtags that had been boiling online exploded again, trending higher than celebrity divorces and global sports combined. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She stepped closer to the podium, her tone softening not to lose power, but to invite intimacy. Some of you watching this felt powerless before today. Maybe you believed that when you walk into a courtroom, the scales are already tipped. That the system bends for the rich and the connected. Let me tell you something, the law is yours. It doesn't belong to a bench or a robe. It belongs to the people. Phones trembled in outstretched hands as those words cut deep, spreading like wildfire across timelines. Jasmine wasn't just addressing a crowd, she was speaking to a generation. And then came the line, the one destined for textbooks, for murals, for the memory of a country hungry for hope. In America, she said, voice lifting like an anthem, truth speaks louder than fear. Silence. A holy silence, the kind that only follows words too heavy for applause. And then the roar came, a sound so loud it rattled the glass doors behind her. Strangers hugged. Students cried. A veteran saluted through tears. For that moment, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a congresswoman. She was an idea, a living symbol that dignity, wielded with courage, could still topple arrogance. As she turned to leave, cameras caught the faintest smile on her lips, not of triumph, but of resolve. Because Jasmine knew something the world was only beginning to suspect. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even the peak. This might just be the first chapter in a much bigger battle. If you've stayed with us through this story, you already know what happened in that courtroom wasn't just a legal showdown, it was a defining moment. Intelligence didn't just hold its ground, it conquered arrogance. Truth didn't whisper, it roared. And in that roar, every one of us heard something we've been craving, proof that justice can still win. But here's the thing, this fight, it doesn't end when the gavel drops. Because what Jasmine Crockett stood for today, accountability, dignity, the unshakable power of truth that's bigger than one courtroom. It's a movement. And movements don't survive on applause alone. They need people. They need voices. They need you. So here's what you can do right now. White heavy check mark, subscribe if you believe truth still matters. White heavy check mark, share this story so the world knows that courage beats corruption every single time. White heavy check mark, join the conversation, drop a comment below. What does justice mean to you? What would you fight for? Because this isn't just Jasmine's fight, it's ours. Yours. Mine. Everyone who still believes that the law belongs to the people, not the powerful. When we stand together, we turn moments into movements. We turn headlines into history. And history, it's being written right now. By all of us. So click that button. Speak up. Stay loud. Because silence is the only thing that ever lets injustice win, and tonight, silence is not an option.